Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun scroll saw project video, we're going to make a beautiful fall and autumn themed bowl cut out completely from start to finish over on the scroll saw. Once again, showing off the scroll saw's versatility for creative and beautiful designs. The pattern we're going to be using comes from the Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine, Fall 2024, issue 96, with the beautiful fretwork deer there on the cover. We've already done a previous project out of this over here on the platform if you guys want to go back and see it. But the design and article we're going to be doing begins on page 20, and it says Autumn Bowls. Practice angle cutting with simple leaves that make stylish fall baskets, by Sheila Landry, and the ones cut here in the magazine were cut by Stephen Gazes. So thank you guys for the beautiful representation of the designs we're going to be making in today's video. And the following pages has the article. It tells you what angle to put the scroll saw at, because to make this and achieve this project, we're going to have to be doing some bevel cutting on the scroll saw. It's where you take the scroll saw out of 90 degrees, you put it on a bevel and do angled cutting. So really cool and a creative way to use the scroll saw. And the page after that has the full size pattern that we have photocopied to its full size, and we do have it here. And the material we're going to be using in today's video is going to be more 3/4 inch pine shelving board. It's just readily available in my area, and it cuts, sands, shapes, and contours very well, and takes paint stains and clear coats very well. And I really think pine is an underrated material. I really love the grain texture in the pine shelving boards that I pick up locally. But here you see the full size pattern, and we're going to have to attach the pattern with the blue painter's tape and spray adhesive method, and then I'll probably also put some clear packing tape over all that for some added reassurance. But you can see the pattern is not that big at all, but once you get everything cut out, it's going to make a nice little bowl or basket in the shape of a fall or autumn leaf. I think this project would also lend itself to be cut out of walnut, oak, and cedar, for those colorful autumn textures that those natural shades of those materials represent. You know, the cedar could be the nice burgundy leaves you see, the walnut could be the leaves that you see on the ground, you know, that crackle when you walk over them and everything. But you see it's got indications here on the pattern to where to drill the pilot hole. It's also got grain orientation to where the bowl can be as strong as possible once you get it cut out. And it's also got the cut direction, because keep in mind, when you are bevel cutting over at the scroll saw, the way you feed the material into the blade will depict how you either raise or recess the piece once the cut is complete. And hopefully that makes sense. We have made some previous bowls over here on the platform, and I hope you all have enjoyed those videos. Here is the most recent bowl we cut out a while back. I think it was earlier this spring or summer. And then we made the wavy basket. I think that was the most recent one. But you can see here on this bowl, we cut into the ring and essentially broke them apart to complete the bevel cut over on the scroll saw. And then after all of the cutting was done, we glued everything back together. I'm going to go back to a different method for cutting out this bowl over at the scroll saw. And once we get it dialed into the proper angle that the magazine says for us to dial the scroll saw blade into, we're going to take a scrap piece of the same 3/4 inch pine material, and we're going to cut it at the angle to make a story stick. Then I can bring the project back over to the workbench and take a small drill bit in my Craftsman drill and drill the pilot holes at an angle. Hopefully you guys understand that. But I'm really excited to make this project now that fall is fast upon us and the leaves are changing. The leaves are showing us how beautiful it is to let things go beyond our control, my friends. Nature is a beautiful thing, and this basket here will represent the fall and autumn vibes. And since we need to get the pattern attached to the material, let's move the camera over to the workbench and get started. And over here on the workbench, we're going to begin by masking off the pine material with blue painter's tape, and then we will put spray adhesive on the back of our pattern and let it get tacky, and then we will smooth it out on the blue painter's tape, making sure to line up the grain direction in the proper way. And then for added reassurance, we'll add clear packing tape over all of this, and then we will step over to the scroll saw to dial in our bevel to make the bowl. And I'll consult the magazine here. And one thing I really like about the Rikon scroll saw, just like a lot of modern scroll saws, the actual head tilts and bevels as opposed to the table. So the table that you run your material on is always at a flat 90 degrees. But now that the angle is dialed in, I will cut my story stick here, and we'll use it to drill the pilot holes back over at the workbench with my Craftsman drill and a small drill bit. And I'll use that bevel we cut on the story stick at the scroll saw to use as an angle to drill all of our pilot holes. And there's not very many in this, but it's very key when making a bowl over at the scroll saw to be as loyal as you can be to the cut line. But after all of the pilot holes are drilled, we will be ready to begin scrolling. And for all of the scrolling on the project, I'll be using a number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade, and it will cut through the pine material exceptionally well with minimal chip out. And this is a very straightforward project. The bevel that we put on the scroll saw will do all of the work, but also when it comes to bevel cutting, make sure you are bevel cutting in the proper direction as indicated on the pattern and in the article. Again, I'm using 3/4 inch pine here to teach the project with visually, but by all means you guys could use other exotic or hardwoods. I do believe with the nature of the project, with it being a fall and autumn leaf, you could of course cut it out of walnut or out of cedar to represent the autumn colors of leaves out in nature. As always, I am taking my time and letting the blade do the work. The interior rings that we are cutting out here are very fragile, so I'm very careful with those as I remove them from the waste wood. And they're all pretty much shaped like a guitar pick. But again, I'm being very loyal to the cut line. If you guys would like to try this pattern, it's available in an older issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazines by Fox Chapel Publishing. I always enjoy making and bringing the projects featured in the magazines to life in a visual format for you guys to hopefully view and enjoy over here on the platform. But it does not take long at all. And again, with the Rikon scroll saw's head tilting as opposed to the actual table tilting, it's a very comfortable cut when you are doing bevel cuts. But you guys just seen me dial the scroll saw back into a perfect 90 degrees and check it to do the final outside release cut. And we are now just cutting out the perimeter of the fall leaf that'll make up the border of the bowl. And once we come back around here, all of the scroll saw work will be complete, and we can head over to the workbench and begin removing the pattern in the blue painter's tape. And one thing I really like about this is the blue painter's tape basically peels away like a post-it note, and it does not leave any kind of sticky residue. But now I will head over to the belt and spindle sander, and I'll very carefully sand where I drilled the pilot holes. I'm trying to stay with that bevel we cut over at the scroll saw. Being very careful here because again the rings are very fragile because they are made out of soft pine. But now I'll do the final sanding here with 180 grit Klingspor Woodworking Shop sandpaper in the vibrating palm sander, and I'll sand the front and back side of each piece individually, again being very careful with the rings. But after it was sanded completely, it was time for glue up, and I did break one of the rings during the sanding, so I did have to repair that. And I did have a time gluing this project up because again, as I've already said, this is pine and it's a very fragile material due to the nature of it and the way this project is cut out. But I tried not to get frustrated as I glued the rings back together. Once they were broke, I just quickly re-glued them back together with medium grade CA glue and activator and worked my way along, building up the bowl. And you can see how the bevel works here. It's kind of like a friction fit. is you raise the next ring up on the layer and glue it in place. And of course you could do a slightly larger bevel and the rings would slide apart that much more, if that makes any sense. Again, I was really having a time with the rings breaking here, and I was just repairing them as needed. Again, my goal here is to show you visually how the project is made and brought to life completely over at the scroll saw. But after all of the glue up was done, I set the leaf themed bowl aside for around 5 minutes to make sure the CA glue had completely dried and cured. And then I opted to add a splash of color with a very light shade of Minwax wood stain that still allows the natural grains and textures of the pine material here to shine through. Just gives it a nice splash of autumn and fall color here. And I wiped off all of the excess. And while it was drying, we could enjoy nature, because fall is such a beautiful time of year, and the leaves really show us the beauty of nature out in the big wide world we live in. But after the bowl had dried, I set it by the shop door and gave it a finish of several coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss. And when that dried, the project was complete. And here we have the completed leaf-themed autumn bowl, cut out completely from start to finish over on the scroll saw using bevel cutting to where the piece could slide like it is to make the cavity in the shape of the bowl. Really, really cool. Once again, showing off the scroll saw's versatility for creative and unique designs. It's always kind of mind-blowing when you take a flat, two-dimensional piece of material and with a little bit of time, practice, patience, and effort, you can make beautiful and creative designs that are not only flat two-dimensional designs, but can go into the third dimension, like this autumn leaf theme bowl here. Really, really cool. I want to once again thank Miss Sheila Landry and Mr. Stephen Gazes for the beautiful, versatile, and creative design from an old issue of Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing. I'll once again hold that magazine up as we get ready to close the video here momentarily. But really, really cool. It took me around 30 minutes to scroll everything out completely from start to finish. There's only like 6 internal cuts to cut out all of the rings, and then there's that final outside perimeter cut that makes up the shape of the leaf there. With the nature of this project, and you need to make sure that everything is dialed in properly, I hope it goes without saying that you need to, of course, take your time and let the blade do the work and be as loyal as you can be to the cut line. And after a little bit, all of the cuts are complete and you was ready to sand and assemble everything. And during the assembly process, I did break some of the rings. One of them actually broke during the sanding process. Keep in mind, I used a very soft 3/4 inch piece of pine material that come from a pine shelving board that I can pick up locally, and pine is very soft. And with the nature of how small some of these rings ended up being, the thinness of them, and keep in mind they were cut at an angle, they did want to break, but I quickly fixed them on the fly with medium grade CA glue and activator, and everything in your guys' opinions hopefully come out nice and crisp, and you can easily tell and depict what this is. You have the beautiful fall leaf there, and then everything recesses to make up the shape of a bowl. And that was a 3-degree bevel. You guys seen that we dialed the scroll saw in, the Rikon scroll saw in at that 3-degree bevel, locked it in place, and we made our story stick here with a scrap piece of the same material we were using. That way we knew it was the same dimensions as what we were actually going to be scrolling. We cut that out in basically a straight line, and then used the Craftsman drill and a small drill bit to guide down into to drill the pilot holes at the angle required. That way it would reduce sanding time as opposed to drilling the pilot holes straight up and down vertically at a 90-degree angle. It's always cool to drill them in at the angle that is required for the bevel cut. But hopefully along the way you guys picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit. After getting everything cut out, sanded, and assembled, we actually stained it with a very light shade of Minwax wood stain that still allows the natural shades and textures, the grains and textures, excuse me, of the pine material we use to shine through. Again, I think pine is a very underrated material, and I really love the grain texture in this here. It's kind of like a very nice line texture like you see in leaves during the fall and autumn season. But I feel like you could make this project out of exotic or hardwoods. Just keep in mind with the angle of the bevel cuts that if you use more exotic or hardwoods, it would be that much more slower of a cut over at the scroll saw. So please be aware of that. But with the fall and autumn nature of this, and you might want to have autumnal colors for the leaves you cut out and the bowls you make over on the scroll saw, I feel like cedar would be an appropriate material to use. I didn't have any on hand to this dimension that was nice enough quality to make the bowl out of, or I would have used cedar or walnut. I think walnut would be a very cool color, maybe oak, you know, just to simulate the different colors of the leaves that is out in nature during the fall and autumn months. But everything came out nice and crisp here, and because of that angle, each of the rings was kind of a friction fit when we went to assemble everything, and I just had to use small dabs of the CA glue and activator, the medium grade CA glue and activator, to lock everything in place. And then I think the finish, Rust-Oleum clear gloss, really made the grain textures pop, and you can see it reflected there in the light of the workshop. Now, if you did not want to use this as a bowl, I feel like you could also use it as a display stand in the shape of a leaf. You could put maybe a little miniature tree up here. I think that would look cool, or maybe a little display piece for the fall season. So always options and versatility. And of course, if you wanted to go in with acrylic craft paints, you could go in and paint everything here. And if you have access or know someone with a laser engraver or a CNC machine maybe, you could put a nice fall quote or logo down here in the base, since that does have a nice size. And I feel like you could put some seasonal walnuts or pecans in here, some potpourri for some seasonal smells, or maybe just some little decorative balls, or maybe, you know, just some odds and ends in here to really jazz this piece up for the fall season. It could be a nice table placement if you were having a party, an anniversary, a wedding, or a get-together during the fall and autumn months. You could put a nice candle down in here as well, like in a glass jar, you know, to protect the wood and everything. So options, versatility, and uses for this beautiful and creative autumn themed bowl. Now, we've made some other bowls over at the scroll saw. This one here, the star-shaped bowl, was also from Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazines, and we made that one, I believe, earlier this year, and this one is in the shape of a star, so a nice, appropriate summer-themed bowl, you know, that you could put some sand and seashells down in for a nice beachside or oceanside cottage. And then earlier than that, we made this nice little segmented bowl that was designed by Steve Good. Both of those bowls are previous videos over here on the platform in case you guys would like to go and see them and view them. But again, the design we used come from Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazine by Fox Chapel Publishing, Fall 2024, issue 96 to be precise, with the nice fretwork deer there on the cover. And the article began on page 20, and there you see the visual representations featured in the magazines, and then you have the one that we made here today on video to hopefully inspire and encourage you guys to try one of these beautiful stylized bowls cut out completely on the scroll saw. And there's a nice article that tells you what angle to put your scroll saw at. I know some scroll saws, the table bevels one way or the other, and sometimes both ways, but I'm happy that the Rikon scroll saw, the actual head of the scroll saw bevels, so I beveled it 3 degrees to the right as indicated here in the article and locked it in place. And the work surface, the work table, so to speak, where I feed the material through, stayed at a perfect 90 degrees. So that's one thing I really love about the Rikon scroll saw. And then the full-size pattern we photocopied was on the following page of the magazine. But there is some additional leaf themed patterns in the full-size pattern pull-out section, which is one thing I really love about Scroll Saw Woodworking and Crafts magazines. Here is another leaf design here featured in the pull-out section. That one looks like maybe an oak leaf or something like that. And then on the back side here you have, I believe this is a maple leaf, so this would be really cool if you are up north in Canada to make that one there. And you could also just draw out a leaf design very easily and just photocopy the actual cuts here and put those in a big leaf you hand drew to make your own creative and one-of-a-kind leaf themed bowl for the fall, and autumn season. Got a little tongue-tied there. But I'm really happy with how it came out. It's my first time making a bowl in this style over at the Scroll Saw. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's still some minor discrepancies down in here. There's some gaps, you know, during the sanding process and everything. But I know if I would want to go and make more and more of these, I would actually refine the process and get better and better with them. But for a very first one over at the scroll saw, hopefully in your guys' opinions, you like how this project came out. And again, hopefully along the way from the start of the video until now as we are closing the video, you guys picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way, and hopefully I have encouraged you guys enough to go out in your garage or workshops and try a nice little bowl design cut out completely over at the scroll saw. Once again, showing off these scroll saws' versatility for creative and unique designs. But that's going to be about all for this one. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.